Well, hello. I'm headed into Dickinson here, heading up Highway 22. I decided to omit the trip from my house to here because it's like 90 miles of same thing. But I realized I haven't really taken you through Dickinson. I don't really go through Dickinson on this trip either, but I go through like one small side of it. So I'll have to give you a tour of Dickinson like I did Fargo and Minot. But anyway, this trip is going to continue north to Killdeer, and then we're going to swoop around Highway 200 over to Turtle Lake, which is where I used to teach, so you'll get to see a town where I used to teach, and then on the way up to Minot. And then the return trip, I accidentally blanked out part of it, but I unplugged the dash cam without realizing it, so that whole stretch between Minot and Bismarck will be missing, but it's not that interesting anyway. Although no, I take that back. It is. I took the scenic route home. Well, but as a bonus, from Bismarck home, I took Old Highway 10, which will be worth it, because that's one of the trips that was lost last year when I dropped the hard drive on the floor and destroyed all my footage. So, it's been a long time since I've done a driving video. I am out of practice. Got to get my rhythm back. What I wanted to talk about today was the words equity and equality. And I'll tell you why it came up. I took a class in Fargo this summer about computer science, and basically it's so I can be certified to teach one specific computer science course. And it's an AP computer science course, and it's designed to be a course that removes a lot of the barriers to AP. And what I mean by that is, if you're in the education world, AP is advanced placement. You can get college credit for taking AP courses while you're still in high school, so it saves you some money. You just have to pass a test and meet certain qualifications. But typically, the students who take these courses are not your minorities, are not your lower income students, are not your rural students. And you know what? I teach at a rural school, so I kind of take that one personally. So this is a course designed to remove those barriers but still provide a high-level course. And the thing is, we're not all equal. I know we make a big deal about that, and in school, you're always upset when the teacher isn't fair or your parents aren't fair. Well, you always trust my brother to go out, but you don't trust me to go out. Yeah, that's because you lie about where you're going. You're younger. You're not old enough to be out wandering on your own because you're only 6, or whatever. I'm not a parent. My knowledge of kids starts when they're teenagers because that's what I teach. Holy cow, that is not a passing lane, dude. This is... yeah. Anyway... So I want you to, as an introduction to this, I just want you to imagine a high school track or college track. So during a race, when your runners that are in the outer lanes are going to start ahead of those that are in the inner lanes. They're all staggered. Now, why is that? Because the ones on the outside have a greater circumference, a greater distance they have to run. So they're not unfairly disadvantaged by being in the outer lane. They get to start further ahead on the track. And that makes the course equitable. It makes a race equitable. It makes a 3,200 meter run a 3,200 meter run no matter which lane you're in. But it's not equal because they're not starting at the same place. Now, it gets to equality because they all run the same distance as a result. But we're helping them out by giving them a little bit of a head start. That is really what the difference between equity and equality is. Equality is you treat everybody the same. Equity is you make sure that they have the opportunity and there's no barriers to their success. Now, you saw my Fargo footage this summer. I actually did more thorough tour of Fargo last summer. I had planned its own standalone video. I had driving footage and I had a lot of walking footage because it wasn't raining and I did the full Broadway and quite a part of Main Avenue as well. One of the things I noticed when I did that walking tour, and I filmed it too, it's just the footage is gone, is the name Bergam is on an awful lot of buildings. Now, the name Bergam probably doesn't mean anything to you, unless you're from North Dakota, but Doug Bergam is our governor. So, yeah, he started out with a few advantages that most of us in the state don't have. Now, he likes to play up his humble beginnings, living on a farm in Arthur. He likes to go home to his farm in Arthur. But the Microsoft campus that I visited was on one of the old Bergam places. This is a family with a lot of contacts and a lot of money. And these are advantages that most of us in the state don't have. And that really is why most of us have no hope of being governor. Most of us, that's not even a thought in our brains to even consider, I'd like to be governor someday. It just isn't even something that occurs to most of us. Well, most of us started out with different families. And you will see that. A lot of your politicians come from families that are politicians or influential in some other way. They grow up with those contacts with the people who have the power, the movers and shakers. They grow up with the right attitudes to be a politician, or the attitude toward money that you need to be an entrepreneur. The attitude toward, well, the abilities to make contacts. A lot of us don't have those skills. You read that book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That's one of the things that it points out is most of us aren't taught the right attitudes to make money. We all want it, but we don't know how to actually make it. Now, is that fair? No. We all grow up with this childhood vision of fairness that means we treat everybody the same. But, yes, that would mean we're all equal. But equal isn't always what's fair. It's not fair to start everybody on the track at the same spot. No, it's not fair that I grew up with really poor social skills because my parents we really didn't go anywhere. Never got to see anybody except family all summer. And, I never developed those contacts or social skills. I am very poor at social skills, as a matter of fact. I have had to learn social skills since getting out on my own. And I'm still not real good at them. That's not fair. But that's not what this is about. We can't do anything about that. There will always be people who are wealthier than others. There will always be those families that just give their kids those advantages of all sorts. There's families that cannot. There will be those families where, dad's a drunk. Dad died. Mom died. The kid's just not wanted. There will always be those. And we can't give everybody the same starting place. There will always be people who are better looking than other people. There will always be people who are more athletic. There will always be people with better social skills, people who can talk better, people who are born in a better location. Would Bill Gates be Bill Gates if he'd grown up in, say, Dickinson, North Dakota? Or did he need access to that computer that he had access to as a kid to become who he was? And believe me, he wouldn't have had access to it in Dickinson, North Dakota. So, again, equity is about removing artificial barriers to success. But it's not about creating an equal starting place for everybody, because we can't do that. One of the common cartoons you'll see in articles about equity and equality, and I saw it in a lot of the ones I linked to, And I'll admit I was lazy. I did mostly internet articles, but you had three kids of different heights standing on crates to see over a fence into a baseball game. The tallest one can see over the fence, sees the game, he's happy. The middle one can barely see over it, like his eyeballs are over the fence. So he, at least he can see it, but he's like, oh, come on, man. And then the shortest one is still not tall enough to see over the fence. So they label that one equality. They all have one crate, they all have the same thing. Then the picture beside it, they put 3 crates under the shortest kid, 2 crates under the medium kid, and 1 crate under the tallest kid. Now they're not equal anymore, but they have equity. They have the same opportunity to enjoy the game. So I thought that was a nice illustration. One of the articles I read did mention, why not remove the barrier if possible? Maybe put a chain link fence up. Then they can see through it and it won't matter. They won't need the crates. And remember, this is a cartoon. It's a thought experiment. But I'm just trying to illustrate the concept of equity, because when it gets put into practice, people start having a problem with it and they start saying it's unfair. For a specific example, special ed. Why do we have a special education program? Because some students are born with brains that are a little bit different and they aren't able to succeed as well in the regular classroom without extra help to learn how to succeed in the regular classroom. So we're removing barriers to their success. It could be ADHD, it could be an emotional disability. There's lots of them, and I'm not an expert on special ed, so I won't comment too much about it. But that's one that often gets brought up, is, well, how come they get the advantage? What you don't realize is that the other kids are the ones with the advantage. It just doesn't look like it, because here's these special ed students that looks like they're getting special treatment, and it's not. It'd be like, if I had a deaf student getting sign language to interpret, or I don't really know how that works, actually. I've never had a deaf student. Okay, I've had students with hearing aids. I've never had a student to the point that they need an interpreter. So I'm not sure how that's actually handled, but, if you have an interpreter for them, well, how come I don't get an interpreter? Well, because you can hear, the deaf kid can't. With some of my labs, I've had to watch out for colorblind kids because they can't see the differences in colors between chemicals. That's a barrier that's in their way. By the way, I'll just mention that until just a few years ago, once you got north of Dickinson, it was all 2-lane highway. This is all new because of the oil boom. And looking kind of silly right now. But we'll see. Oil may come back. According to the World Health Organization, equity is, and I'm quoting here, that's why I've got the subnote down below. According to the World Health Organization, equity is the absence of avoidable or remediable differences among groups of people, whether those groups are defined socially, economically, demographically, or geographically. There's a lot of different ways, a lot of different barriers that can be in your way. Your culture just may be different. That's one of the reasons, actually, why schools are trying to get more minorities as teachers. Because there are those social differences, cultural differences, just because of who they are. Or, take where I teach. You get somebody from a city, they're coming from a very different culture than somebody from a rural area. Totally different understanding. And the same thing would be if you threw me into a big city school. I'm coming from a way different culture, and it's going to take me a while to learn how to adapt and teach those kids and understand them, because it really is a different culture. My farming examples and ranching examples that I use in some of the stuff I teach, not going to mean so much. Stoplight problem, that they talk about in physics, my kids know what a stoplight is. I mean, they're not country bumpkins. But a stoplight, I mean, there isn't one in the county or in any of the counties surrounding us. It's not part of their daily experience. Toll roads, not part of their daily experience. That's a barrier. And they've found that a lot of the tests that have been written, these standardized tests, don't take local culture into account. They're trying, but they actually, kids get lost. Like, here's one for me. I got lost in statistics class when they would start talking about card games or gambling. I don't do that. I don't gamble. So I'm just like, I don't know what a full flush is or whatever. That was a big, big, big barrier to me in statistics. And the advice my professor gave me was, well, figure it out. And it's impossible to adapt your classroom for every single student. You do your best to meet different learning styles and present information coming in several different directions. And that's what this computer science class does. You have a kid who's not used to computers. They are coming in with a huge disadvantage in a computer science class. I mean, I have students, even though our school is one-to-one, who still can't find files when they save them, and you say, well, where did you save it? In Word. Yeah, where on your computer? I don't know, with Word. And you just want to slap your forehead in frustration. But really, they don't know. So, equity, I liked this source. I just wrote the number down here, but it's source 4. Equity is actually more of a process. Equality is the result of the process. So remember, to be equitable at our track meet, we start our runners at different places. The result is they all run an equal race. They all run 3,200 meters or whatever. So our goal is to give everybody what they need in order to be successful. And that means we're not always treating everybody the same. And we can get wrapped up in privilege, and we don't always think of ourselves as privileged. But that's where your decisions are made to benefit enough people, but not all people. And that can be based on so many things. The country, the ethnicity, language, parents, socioeconomic status. You know, in my little rural school, we have an ELL, that's an English language learner teacher. Why? Because we have a large Hispanic population. When you have students coming in who can't speak English, they're coming in with kind of a big barrier to learning. It's not their fault. It means absolutely nothing about their intelligence. But yeah, that's a big problem. So you have to find a way to make school equitable for them. The goal is that they can get the same education as the other kids. Another one that's been controversial in several states, it was big in this state a few years ago, is school funding. And most states in this country do a terrible job with school funding, including the one where I live. But anyway, one would think, okay, if we give the same number of dollars per student, that would be equality. Yes. But what about a rural school, where it's more expensive to teach students just because you don't have the economy of scale? What about if you have an area with a lot of low-income students? Here's one that was kind of behind the lawsuit in North Dakota. What if you have different property values? Because in North Dakota, we rely a lot on local property tax. What if this area doesn't have a lot of land, or the land isn't worth much? You know, like Williston School District does not have much land area. And yet there's this rural school district almost totally surrounding with a lot of land area and hardly any kids. Williston's got lots of kids, not a lot of land area. That's not equitable. What if you are in a low-income area? I think I said that one. Starting with students who are behind. Here's another big one in North Dakota. What if your school's on a reservation? What if you have a high special ed population in your school district? Suddenly, giving the exact same dollar amount to every single kid doesn't make as much sense. And that's why this topic can be such a fight. Because if you're one of the rich schools that's got like a lot of oil and a lot of land that's worth a lot of money, you don't want to be giving any of that up to other schools. You almost feel like it's your right. It's your land. Meanwhile, if you're one of those schools where the land isn't worth much, there's no industry to speak of, not a lot of tax base, and everybody's poor, you need some help. You may need more help because of the social conditions in your district. Another one that comes up, schools in lower income areas often need more resources and better teachers in order to catch up with those more affluent areas. Those areas that are offering the AP courses and have the fancy computer lab and aren't worried about the water coming in through their roof. We don't have equity among our schools in the United States. Hopefully your country is better. Or your state is. One of the sources I was looking at, and I'll just finish that thought off. They found teachers will stay at the more affluent schools at a much greater rate than they do at the high poverty schools. So you have constant turnover, then you can't build a program, and that handicaps the kids more and more every year. So after 12 years in one of those schools, your kids are really behind. Wouldn't it be nice if we could get teachers to come there and stay there? If we could get good teachers. One of the other things that'll happen sometimes is the good teachers get poached and move on to the more affluent districts, and they are actually recruited away. One of the sources I looked at talked about early childhood education. I'm not too knowledgeable about that. I teach at the other end, but that's one of the ways that they're starting to offer some equity, because some kids come to school with a lot more language than other kids just because their parents read to them, their parents talked to them more. They have a significantly larger vocabulary just because they're home. They come in with those social skills to function in a school, whereas other students don't have those advantages. And that's not an obvious advantage, and at times you just want to blame the kid, but it's not the kid's fault. And that's one of the things early childhood education can do, is teach those social skills. In fact, I wish kindergarten would spend more time teaching those social skills rather than trying to jump into academics so quickly. That's an editorial comment and no citation for it. And sometimes just the culture of the town as regards the school can be a big barrier. Here everybody knows everybody, it's small school and all that. Other communities, people don't trust the school, and they pass that attitude on to their kids. I'll tell you one. I taught some summers on the reservation, and by the time I taught there, they had a school there. Now you go back a few decades, not that many decades, those kids weren't going to school there. They were forced to go to a boarding school far away from home. It was so bad, some of them would run away from the boarding school in the middle of winter in North Dakota to try and get home. And these boarding schools, some of them were so bad, they would tell them that they couldn't practice their culture. They had to cut their hair a certain way. They couldn't speak their language. Go back a little further than I'm talking right there. They would force religion on them. Not the religion that was their culture. You know, it's hard to build up trust for school if that's your experience with school. I feel like how we've treated our Native American population could be a whole series of driving videos. But I also feel like maybe I'm not the person most qualified to talk about that. Um, but I might at some point. Technology has been offered up as an equalizer. And, that's part of why our school went 1-to-1, because some of these kids were already showing up at school with their own laptop. Other kids, they're lucky if they have a notebook. So now every one of them has the technology. Now, admittedly, not all of them have that technology at home. They may not have wireless internet at home, although most do have cell phones, so their method of accessing it may be different, but they do have it. But even so, there's a few that don't have cell phones. But one of the things that's been found is that how technology is used in low-income schools versus more affluent schools is actually quite different. In your low-income schools, if the technology is used, it's more as a drill and practice. The higher-income schools are going to work more on the higher-order creative skills, higher-order thinking skills and creativity. The lower-income schools, that's actually seen as frivolous or a waste of time. So there you've got, again, limiting of opportunity. So how do you get that into the lower income schools when we all know why they're doing the drill and the practice type stuff instead of the other? Because these students do come in lacking a lot more basic skills. And the longer they're in school, generally the further they fall behind. How do you overcome that? And that's part of this equity discussion. I don't have good answers for it. This computer science course that I'll be teaching is one such, because I'll tell you what, I was talking to somebody the other day who graduated from the school where I teach. He said he was one of the few people in his major at college who'd never had a computer science class. Our school has not offered anything like that till next year when I will be teaching it in the fall. And we're limited because we're rural. We're limited because we don't have a lot of different cultures here. Our kids are not exposed to different cultures, different religions, different sexual orientations. That is a big limit. And to go function in the world, they walk out with that big handicap. So I think I've mentioned before, that's part of why I think Science Olympiad is valuable. It just gives them that larger world that too many of them just don't know. And you'd think they would, and with all technology we have, but pretty sheltered. So I focused on schools mostly with this little talk. It is an important consideration for schools. You're talking your taxes, your local culture. Your curriculum is generally not local. It's brought in from outside. It's probably from either Texas or California. And especially if you have one of these schools where they've decided to go with teacher-proof lessons, which are basically scripted and you're told what to say and do. And it doesn't work. Our kids are not all starting at the same place. You put a bunch of farming questions in your curriculum, and your city kids are just going to go, what? You do a lot of city-type questions or, about the local concerts and stuff, your country kids are going to be going, what? So why not remove those barriers when possible? And we could continue this equity discussion to talk about healthcare. For example, there was the possibility my community would lose its hospital not too long ago. And we have a real struggle to get doctors. If you're a doctor, why would you come here? Go somewhere where you'll make more money and you can specialize more. And there's more opportunity. Same thing with teachers. We're still looking for a second science teacher. Why would you come here? You can make more money somewhere else. And that's going to put our kids at a disadvantage. And it may mean I don't teach this computer science class next year because I have to teach the basics. And that scares me. And that's one of those barriers that when they talk about, well, there's more teachers than there are jobs, true. The shortages are more specific than that. They're in specific subject areas. They're in specific geographical regions, specific socioeconomic regions. And I think it's an important part of equity to encourage teachers to go to places like that. And sadly, the focus in our education system has been more on how do we get people out of the public school and into private schools. Well, guess what? That doesn't do any good where I live because the nearest private school is 90 miles away in Dickinson. So that's why we need to look more at that equity discussion. And too many people are wrapped up in that childhood vision of fairness and equality to recognize the nuance there, that equity is something different. Equity is getting everybody to the same place so that they have the same opportunity to get the equal outcome. Yeah, the faster kid is going to run that 3,200 meter run and win it, but the slow kid at least has the opportunity to do so. He's not further handicapped because he's in the outside lane. The special ed student at least has the opportunity to succeed in a class, whether they take that opportunity or not. Whether my rural students take advantage of this computer science class or not. Some of them are going to choose not to, or they will take it, but they won't succeed in it because they won't work hard enough. The opportunity is there. The lessons are designed to remove a lot of barriers, but sometimes your worst barrier is yourself, and that is a tough one to fight around. And if you can ever figure that one out for me, let me know. So thank you for watching. We'll pick this up later. Bye-bye.